Hey everybody, we're going to do another Around the World update today. So it's Sunday afternoon. I've been doing a little bit of stuff, a little tinkering here, a little tinkering there around the fish room this week. So we're just going to go around the room and look at little changes I've made and update on little things we've done. One of the things I've done was replaced the female turquoise angelfish that passed away in this tank recently. I took one of the angels out of my angelfish tank, one of the smaller ones that got picked on a lot, and I put it in here hoping that, being so small, the big male back there wouldn't really mind or bother with the smaller fish. And that was not the case. The smaller fish got relegated up into hiding in the corner above the woodwork I have back there suspended. And that was about it. After several days, it was very apparent that that was not going to change. And so I took that angelfish out and I put that in another tank that we're going to look at in a few minutes here. So I think as time goes on, we're just going to let this tank ride, see what happens. I really don't know what this is eventually going to evolve into. It is called my 29 miscellaneous because it's been a lot of things over the years. It's one of my oldest tanks. So again, we're just going to let it ride. It just keeps ticking over like a clock. Everything in there is fine. I haven't lost any other fish besides that one. And I haven't made any changes other than a simple water change and wiping the glass down and attempting to put that angel in there that did not work. So we'll see what happens with that in the long run. The gourami tank doesn't have a ton going on. I do have some issues with my pH. I just shot a video this morning where I did a big water change on this tank. Well, it actually wasn't a big water change. That was sort of the whole point of the video. It was about a 20%, 25% water change. I haven't cut any plants back in a while. I haven't done anything other really than wipe the glass down in quite a while in this tank. I did recently add two dwarf African clawed frogs, and I've seen them a few times. They are really small and they don't make appearances very often. They got a million places to hide in there, as you can well imagine. So I haven't seen a whole lot of the frogs since they've been in there, and frankly I've not seen both of them at the same time, so I may just be seeing one in more than one spot. You know, if you've got multiple animals in the tank, you can't really say, oh, I've got two, until you see them both together. And so I don't know that both of them are still alive, but I don't have any reason to believe either one is dead. I have not seen a dead frog in there, or there's nothing in there that would eat a frog or anything. So again, I'm assuming I've got both of them, but I've never seen both at once. Other than that, no changes. So moving along to the angelfish tank. Other than a water change, a little bit of rebuilding my cave structure down here that had been knocked down over time, more than likely by me getting in there and doing gravel vacking. So I put that back, I fixed that. I did about maybe a 25% water change on this tank as well. And then I did take that one angelfish out and attempted to put it in the 29, and that didn't work. So again, we'll get to where that angelfish ended up. So other than that, nothing's really going on in here, just sort of ticking over as usual. I did shoot some video on this tank not too long ago, so you can check out my angelfish tank playlist if you want to see any more video of this tank. But again, nothing really to talk about other than it's my angelfish tank. So we will get to that later. T-bar tank, I don't really have anything to talk about with this one either. I haven't even done a water change on this tank in the past week. The T-bar is still just in there looking beautiful as ever. I really do like him. I was seeing some pictures of T-bars recently, and the males had the very noticeable notchal hump on them. And I'm wondering if this fish is still not fully developed, or if it actually would require the presence of a female, or possibly even the presence of other males, in order to show some sort of dominance in some sort of physical outward appearance. So I don't think I've had him for a full year yet. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't have any experience with that fish at all. I just know he's really, really pretty. He's kind of a jerk. He's kind of annoying. But at the same time, I guess when you look like that, you can get away with it. So he's still in there, and I don't really have any plans at this point of getting rid of him. He does kind of keep my black ghost knifefish hidden, but I don't really think it's that stressful to my black ghost, and it does make seeing the black ghost more of a rare treat. rather than seeing it swim around the tank all the time. So I don't mind, I don't mind the reclusive fish from time to time, as long as I do see them occasionally. I did actually get a glimpse, I should have mentioned when we were looking at the gourami tank, I got a glimpse of my South American bumblebee that is in there, and it has been in there forever, and I've only seen it literally like 4 times in the last couple of years. So that was a nice little surprise for me. I don't think it really came out on video, so unfortunately that's probably not going to show up for you guys, but he is in there and he is still alive, so there's always hope that we will get to see him again in the future. So there's my angelfish. That's where it ended up, and I like it. I've thought about adding another angelfish to this tank with this one, but we're going to just wait and see how this one works out. I can't tell whether it's an issue or not with the rainbow fish. The rainbow fish doesn't seem to bother the angelfish at all, in the sense that it's doing so directly, but it almost seems like it does spook the angelfish sometimes because it's so boisterous. Now again, angelfish are not these little delicate flowers that a lot of people seem to think they are. They are cichlids, and they are, aggressive in their own right. I've seen angelfish kill other fish. I've seen angelfish kill other angelfish. They can be really aggressive. Those long frilly fins have been bred into them. But the personality of a cichlid is still in there. So I'm not worried about it being spooked a little bit occasionally by the boisterous, darting and dashing of the rainbow fish. As long as it's not being picked on or its fins aren't being attacked and nipped at, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I don't believe the glow light tetras will do that, and I do have some Rasbora hets in there, and I don't believe they will do that either. I haven't seen any signs of them doing so yet. But it's only been a couple of days, so we'll see how that works out in the long run. In the meantime, I'm really happy with the way it looks. I think the angelfish looks beautiful in there. I really like this tank. You can see that frog clearly enough. There's 2 of them in here, and I see them all the time. They look great in here. I'm actually considering putting 3 or maybe even 4 of them in here. And did you see that glare on the camera as I went past? Right there, it makes it a little difficult to see. That is exactly what I'm talking about with this lighting fixture. I really do want to move it and do something with it, because again, filming my tanks is a big part of the hobby for me. So lighting is important not only to my plants and to my tanks, but it's also important for my filming. And that just kind of gets on my nerves, where I have spots where I simply either can't hold the camera, or you'll see glares in the background from the over lighting. So I don't know what's going to eventually happen to the lighting on this tank. Right now, that's the best we can do. I did try actually flipping it. You can't really see. Well, there you go. That's a better look at it. I moved the entire fixture, and instead of hanging it from these bars, I actually set the whole thing on top of these bars. And it really made a big difference in the way the tank was lighted. First of all, it really reduced the amount of lighting. When you move light away from what you're shining it on, it does not take much distance to greatly reduce the amount of light that's shining on it. In fact, it's a quartered equation. So every time you double the distance, you quarter the intensity. So simply moving that upwards 3 inches really reduced the amount of light that was on the tank. So I didn't like it in that regard. And then, of course, the bleed over light was ridiculous at that point. So it just became, something that was out of the question, and I wasn't going to do it that way. I have considered taking this little strip LED and hanging that underneath of that little bracket there, but then that would leave this light to go on my brackish tank, and I don't know if I want to do that yet either. So I do have some options I'm toying with, and I will probably do a video about that and my lighting playlist whenever I get around to doing that. I've been doing a lot more outdoorsy stuff this time of year, so we'll get back into the videos here as the summer progresses. So my brackish tank is still sort of in the process of being cleaned up. Let me get you to where you can see it. There we go. I scraped down the glass again. It was just algae growing back and not cyanobacteria. But I am getting some more of that red cyanobacteria growing in there. It's not all just the dead remnants of when I treated it before. It really is new growth in there. So don't really know what to do about that. I think just by nature of this tank, it's going to be a dirty tank. My puffer in here that we can see is a meat eater, and he's a messy eater, and he leaves a lot of snail bits and parts around the tank, and all of that meat breaking down really makes for high nitrate levels and high phosphates in the tank. So it's just a dirty tank. I mean, the water's clean and that right, but there's a lot of organics, and that accounts for a lot of growth. I also do admittedly have this tank very, very brightly lit. They're just beautiful fish, and I like to see them, and there's a price you pay for that. You know, I do talk about that quite often when I talk about how we manage our tanks. You know, there's a price for doing things. Everything is going to affect something else. So if you want a nice brightly lit tank that really shows off your fish, you can expect to also grow a lot of not necessarily wanted vegetation in your tank, or cyanobacteria. You know, this red stuff there is bacteria. That's not any kind of red algae growing. That's cyanobacteria. And that back there gives you a good idea of what I'm talking about, the difference between you know, this stuff here that's sort of like the dead remnants of it and has been kind of scraped away, versus these much smoother looking sheets that almost look like a film that's growing across the rock. That's actually living bacteria, and I can get in there and pull that off in sheets, and I will. That's what I've been working on. That's why the tank still looks so bad. I haven't finished this process yet. I warn people all the time of doing too much too quickly to a tank. You can really disrupt the nitrogen cycle and really throw the balance of a tank out by getting in there and scrubbing down too vigorously. So it's a process, you know, and I'm getting there. We're getting cleaner and cleaner, and the glass is clean enough that we can see the fish at least now. So I can shoot some video and take some photography of my sweet little butterbean there. Below him in my quarantine tank is still just some spare plants that I've cut down from another tank. I don't really have anything to do with them yet, so I just threw them in there so they'd stay alive. I've got 10 neons. Shockingly, not one has died, even though I bought them at the big chain pet store. You always expect to lose neons, but these have not. I've not lost one of them in a week now. I also have 3 more African dwarf clawed frogs in quarantine, so when they come out, don't really know exactly where they're going to go yet, but as I said, I really do like the idea of putting quite a few frogs in this open top tank here. I really like that idea, so we'll see how that pans out. Snail tank is just full of snails, nothing going on in there. I just throw fish food in there, and I grow pond snails. It's not really difficult to do. You don't really have to do anything other than make sure there's lots of food, lots of organics, and some calcium carbonate in there. I use eggshells, and that gives the snails a source of calcium so that their shells can be fairly hard. You can't really do shelled animals in very soft water. They need the calcium for their shells, so that's why I have eggshells in that tank. My gudgeon tank here is still more or less just kind of ticking over. I'm waiting to see what happens. It looks like they're hovering next to each other in the back corner, and I'm getting a little bit of that kind of activity, so it is safe to say that by tonight I am going to have more eggs in there. So look forward to at least another short video of seeing some gudgeons swimming around with their eggs. Still haven't really thought about this tank in regards to anything other than it simply being my gudgeon tank. I just kind of enjoy watching them do their thing. They're super duper greedy. I can't come near the tank without them just banging their faces against the glass to get food. They have cavernous mouths. They're really difficult feeders though. They've gotten used to eating the floating flake that I put in there, and they go after that. But they seem confused when I put something like bloodworms in. It's almost like they don't recognize it as food, and I wind up with stuff all around in the tank. I actually have to get in here and do a little cleaning now. If you can see all that stuff that's caught in the micro swords, that's Tubifex worms. I tried putting some Tubifex in there, and they ignored it. They didn't even seem to realize it was food, and now it's all sort of caught in that micro sword. I know that looks like grass, but it's not. It's micro swords. I don't think they're getting enough light. I think a little too much of that diatom algae has grown onto them. You can see how brown these leaves look. I don't care about this stuff. That's going to get pulled out and thrown away. The stuff that's growing in there, that diatom algae will block the light. So the new growth has come out, and that stuff's getting plenty of light. But this micro sword is a plant that really needs a lot of light to begin with, or at least a really, relatively high amount, not necessarily a ton. But that's at the bottom of the tank, and it's farthest away from the light, and it also has some of the diatom growing on it, and that very well could be the difference between that stuff making it in this tank and not making it. So I do need to get over and do a water change on this tank and get that cleaned up a little bit, and I definitely need to get all that tube effects worm out of there that they haven't been eating. But this is the one tank, if you watched my video about pH, the pH in this tank is really high, and it's really strange. I don't know why it's so high, but it sits up around 7.6. It is the only tank I have that doesn't have any wood in it, but the pH is actually higher than what comes out of my tap. So perhaps it is simply after my water has degassed, it elevates to this, but it's one that I'm definitely going to have to be careful of and keep an eye on when I do my water change, and we'll see what happens. So look forward to some video of these two spawning. Maybe I'll even be able to get the process in action, because they do it fairly frequently, about once a week it seems like now. So I'm pretty sure by that behavior we can expect to see some eggs within a day or so. So last, and of course not least, is my 125. I did a water change in here, I guess within about the last 4 or 5 days, maybe pushing a week now. I cut some of the plants back. I mainly cut back the water sprite that was here in the middle of the tank. Let me step back and we'll get an overview of the whole tank. I have to get on the other side of the table here so that we can see the whole tank in one shot. It is 6 feet long. So you can see that massive roots hanging in the middle. That is the root mass from the giant pile of water sprite that used to be in there. I cut back a lot of the water sprite, but I left the main mass there so that the roots are still intact and the body will start growing back. So the reason I did that was, well, there was a few reasons. One, it was just covering the surface of the tank, and it was really blocking the water flow from going anywhere. If you'll notice the way I have my spray bar set up, I have the first section angled sort of back and up, so it moves the surface water a little bit. I don't like a lot of agitation on the surface of my water. You don't need it. That's not necessary. I'm not going to get into a discussion about that now, but you don't have to have a lot of agitation on the surface of your water, provided you've got plenty of circulation. The rest of my spray bar is facing sort of the opposite direction, is kind of against the glass and down, so that actually creates this sort of downward flow that moves the water across the bottom of the tank, and that's why I get all that nice movement on the plants and everything here. But the result of all that massive amount of... hang on. That means my laundry is done. That massive amount of water sprite that was across the surface of the tank was just blocking the water flow to the point where I was really getting a lot of the biofilm, and all that was building up at this end of the tank. Now I know it still looks pretty stagnant, and it kind of is, but it's not as much as you would think, and that biofilm is not as much of an issue as it was when I had so much of the water sprite in here. You can still see sort of the remnants of last little bits of leaves that didn't get trimmed properly or coming off and breaking loose. My Synodontis and my Gourami are plant eaters, and you can see that temple plant in the back is taking its toll. It's getting munched on and nibbled. The Synodontis here has been not quite sure what to make of the new brightly lit tank. I'm really surprised it's being so out with me being right in front of it like this. It usually darts back into the roots and hides for a moment before it comes back out and starts swimming around. My Tenopoma, I don't know why, but is being exceptionally timid and is hanging out way up there. Now he definitely does not like the fact that the lighting in this tank has been so increased by the reduction of all the huge amount of water sprite that was growing up in there. The other reason I reduced the water sprite that was growing all over in there was because I do still have that green Spirogyra algae in this tank, and while it doesn't look too bad in most of the tank, I'll show you a little spot of it. That bright green that's on that rock right there, and if you can see the bright green through all that temple plant on this rock, that also is the Spirogyra algae. And it gets kept under control by the Odos and by the Gourami, but when it's growing on the surface and on the temple plant, or I'm sorry, the water sprite, and it's directly under the light, it was growing thick, and it was almost starting to look like that scummy mat you'll see on the surface of a pond, where you'll actually get that bubbly, goopy, nasty look. It was starting to look like that across the surface. So what I did was groomed as much of that out as I could. I'll never get on top of it completely. You know, there's always going to be some in there. But with what I took out, I removed a big mass of it, and that actually is just, you know, part of what I've got to do with my maintenance and staying on top of the algal growth in my tanks. So that's really all that was going on in this tank this week, was a water change and a plant removal. Nothing new fish-wise. I did consider putting one of those African frogs in here, but I really think my Tenopoma would just make a snack of it, so I'm not really even going to consider that anymore. So there you have it. That's all the way around the world. We'll start, you know, we'll end up back here where we started at the 29 miscellaneous. So go ahead and subscribe if you're not already. Do a lot of different types of videos. These round of the worlds are usually pretty popular. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you at the very least next week on the next one.